Well, hi everyone. It's Andy Bernstein, your host of the Legends of Sport podcast. This week, we have one of my oldest and dearest friends. I don't like using the O word, but we've been around for a while, the two of us. The great Rick Welts, the Hall of Famer himself. Rick is coming out of retirement just to do this podcast. Not really, but he was so gracious to come onto the podcast and have a nice long chat with me. Like I said, we go back to the beginning of time in the NBA together. My first recollections of Rick was probably the 84 All-Star game, where he single-handedly created All-Star Weekend with the slam dunk contest. And the rest is history. Dream Team, WNBA, executive with the Suns, the Warriors. This guy has done it all. I think he's got 8 championship rings across the board of NBA, WNBA, and G League. But most importantly, Rick is a great friend, and his courage in 2011 to come out and admit that he was gay, having kept that secret for so long, is just an amazing story in itself. But we touched on that. We touched on a lot of things on this podcast, and most especially, we talked about this guy, David Stern, our mentor, our boss. Used to call him Uncle David back in the day, but he was anything but your friendly uncle sometimes. He was a tough guy to work for, but always demanded the best from the people around him because he hired the best. And nobody better than Rick Welts. So sit back, folks, enjoy this great podcast with the great, wonderful, the Hall of Famer himself, Rick Welts. And I'll see you on the backside. I want to welcome one of my dearest friends. I'm not going to use the OLD word. One of my really, really good friends in the business for a million years, the great Rick Welts, to the Legends of Sport podcast. Rick, you are, you're a legend across the board. But to me, you're a great friend. We started off together, and look where we are now. You're retired, and I'm behind a microphone. So figure that out.
Well, I think we're both where we're supposed to be. I will tell you, though, I have absolutely failed miserably at retirement.
Yeah, tell me about it. So how
Um,
is it? It's kind of a new thing, right?
no, it's just it was fun for a little while, just goofing off. But I've got great new projects. I'm working harder than I've ever worked, and a
Uh-huh.
lot of them NBA related. But at least I don't have my 8 Zoom calls a day,
Oh my God,
which I
man.
don't miss. I don't miss
Yeah,
it.
I heard you say during the pandemic you did, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like 5,000 Zoom calls or some
Just
ridiculous thing.
crazy. Just crazy. Just
Yeah.
crazy. We lived on it. It got us through.
Yeah, I
So it
know.
served its
Crazy.
purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, on top of opening a building and everything else you were doing up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So Rick, 50 years in the NBA. I mean, it's a little astounding to think about that you and I met 40, well, yeah, about 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
40,
Yeah.
38 years ago.
Something like
Um,
that.
I was thinking, I was at the Lakers Showtime reunion last week, and
Oh,
stories that come out of that, and the camaraderie. Um, can you talk a little bit about what it was like at the NBA way at the beginning when you first started? I mean, there was, how many people were working there? What was the
yeah.
environment like?
I had no idea what I was getting into. You have to remember, I had grown up in Seattle, Washington. We'd won an NBA championship in 1979. I thought the NBA owned the world. Like I thought it
Right.
was the most amazing sports property of all time.
Yeah.
And this clever lawyer called me one day and said, "Hey, why don't you come back and we'll talk about maybe coming to work here at the NBA," which sounded amazing to me. I don't think I've been to New York like once before and got to spend a night in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and walked over to the Olympic Tower where the NBA still is today. Although
Hmm.
they were on one half of one floor at that point,
Right.
50 floors,
Right. I know.
and met this lawyer who my half-hour appointment I think went about 2 hours, and ended up working for David Stern a few months later. I was the 35th employee of
Wow.
the NBA, counting the mailroom. That was
Wow.
everybody who worked there.
Wow.
And
That's crazy.
Stern's mission was to start to build a business organization, which
Yeah.
the NBA didn't have. Scheduled games and signed referees, and that was about it. So, yeah, it was a time I wouldn't trade for anything. It's as
Yeah.
close to that Camelot as you would ever guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stern was collecting a bunch of young people who loved the NBA. I fit all his criteria. I was young. Maybe most important, I love the NBA, but most importantly, I was very inexpensive.
Yeah, well, they were watching their petties back in those days. Yeah, that's for sure. You and I really bonded. I think it had to be the 84 All-Star weekend, which you single-handedly created. The genesis of that really was, can you just describe like how you talked David into going from a game to a weekend? How did that work?
Well, remember that is the weekend that David Stern he'd been elected commissioner, but he became commissioner after that weekend.
Right,
So this
right,
was
right.
Larry O'Brien's last weekend in office. And
Hmm.
you were going to All-Star games even before that. It was one hotel.
Yeah,
Everybody showed up on Saturday. You went to a banquet on Saturday night with usually a really bad comedian.
yeah, yeah.
Played the All-Star game on Sunday afternoon. Everybody goes home. And Stern had kind of set out some things that we were going to do when he
Hmm.
was commissioner. One of them uh, was he wanted to get back in touch with the history of the game. We
Hmm.
didn't have a video history, we didn't have a photographic history,
Hmm.
and we didn't have a relationship history with
Yeah.
all of the players who had, given us the opportunity to have the jobs we had. So that was in the back of my mind. There was a wonderful NBA executive by the name of Carl Shearer, who was
Hmm.
he was president of Denver Nuggets at the time, and as you know,
Yeah.
probably a lot of your listeners know, the Nuggets had a great ABA heritage as well before they came into the NBA. And
Mhm.
one of the most famous events in the history of basketball happened in Denver in McNichols Arena in 1976, which was the ABA
Yeah.
slam dunk contest.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That was crazy with like David Thompson and all those guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a young Julius Erving
Julius
did
Erving, of
something
course.
no
Yeah.
one had ever seen before. He picked
Yeah.
up the ball, went into the court, walked to the other end, then charging down the court and took off from the free throw line and dunked the ball to win the ABA Slam Dunk Championship.
Yeah. Insane.
So now we're 8 years later.
Yeah.
Carl comes to New York. We started playing the All Star game about November before the February. It's a little longer time period now to
Yeah.
plan the All Star game. And we met for a drink, and he's like, I got an idea.
Yeah.
We need to celebrate Denver's All Star heritage, and our ABA heritage.
Hmm.
Let's at halftime, let's do a slam dunk contest.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. We're on CBS. They have this halftime programming. I'm not sure if that'll work. But I went home that night, and by kind of like total chance, I turned on the television set, and there was a baseball old timers game from Washington D.C. on. And
Hmm.
I'm watching this game, and some 6-year-old guy hits a home run over the Cracker Jack sign in left field. It was a Cracker Jack old timers game. Something just clicked with
Yeah.
me. I went in the next day and said, I'm like, okay, here's an idea. Let's do like a second day of events.
Uh-huh.
And let's invite back all these players that you want to back get into a relationship with, and we'll have an old timers game. And
Hmm.
then it's Denver. Carl's got this great idea. We'll do a slam dunk contest.
Hmm.
And most importantly for me, because it was my job, I think I can actually sell that to a sponsor.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't sold anything. It was the NBA. Nobody wanted to buy anything.
Yeah.
So he said, I kind of like it. So let me go talk to the commissioner.
Mhm.
And he came back, and it was kind of like, yeah, his last weekend in office, like he's not buying it. And
Yeah.
I kind of gave up on the idea. But a few days later, I don't know what happened. Stern comes back to my office and says, okay, commissioner says you can do it on two conditions. One, it doesn't cost the NBA a penny. You got to figure out how to pay for the whole thing. And second, like you can't embarrass him on his last weekend.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Well,
okay, let's go.
you
Let's go.
you sent him out with on a bang. I mean, didn't Larry Nance Sr. win that thing?
Yeah,
Okay. So I have a
yeah.
really funny story. So Larry Nance Jr. is a rookie with the Lakers, right? I wasn't sure if it was the first one or the second one that he, 84, 85, but 84. And he goes up for a dunk in preseason, and it looks exactly like his dad's dunk. So I did a Instagram post with them next to each other, right?
Wow.
And I showed it to him. He goes, "Wow, that picture that we had that on our wall when I was a kid growing up." He says, "Where did you get that?" I said, "What do you mean, where did I get that? I took that." And then he said, "How the blank old are you?" I said, "Well, I'm old enough to have taken that, probably older than your dad."
That's funny. That's so funny. Well,
So it's,
you know,
yeah,
that weekend was the first time we ever got any coverage in Sports Illustrated. We got like 6 pages of Sports Illustrated.
right, right.
Julius Erving, God bless him, came back to, you know, at the end of his career to be in the slam dunk contest. But you're
Yeah,
right, you remember it the right way. You
yeah,
know, I think when Julius recreated that dunk he done, I think he was about this far inside the free throw line this
right.
time, toward the end of his career. This
Yeah,
rookie, Larry Nance, it was kind of a passing of the mantle to a younger generation and a passing of the torch from Larry O'Brien to David. So
yeah,
it was a great launch. It was a great
yeah.
launch for the new commissioner.
It's crazy because looking back, those guys wanted to be in the dunk contest.
Oh yeah,
Michael, Dominique,
yeah.
Nance, Kenny Skywalker. I mean, trying to think of all these guys, and that kept going, until, through like Dwight Howard and then now, like, what's the deal? I mean, there's incentive with money and it's cool to win it, but how come nobody
Mm.
wants to do it anymore?
I think it became probably because of Michael and Dominique and these great players that did these, you know, legendary dunks that you
Mhm.
captured that were on every kid's wall.
Yeah,
It became kind of a macho a test of your like masculinity or something. Like nobody wanted to embarrass themselves and
yeah,
not be as good as
yeah.
those guys. And I think it took a while. You know, it's taken a while. We still get great dunks. You
Yeah,
know,
we do. It's just, it's just that like it just turned a little bit, and I don't
yeah.
know. I've had this idea. I don't know if I ever discussed it with you. I actually mentioned it to Commissioner Silver at the beginning of his reign, so maybe he has in the back of his mind. I'm thinking, why not get like five of the greatest dunkers of all time, put their like three or four best dunks in a hat, and have a designated dunker from today pick the ones that he's going to do, and then have that guy judge it along with the fans, because then you're like sort of recreating history, right? I
That'd
mean,
be
we've kind
fun.
of seen that with a few things.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking Dwight Howard and all that stuff, but
yeah,
anyway, I just think it needs a little, like, as we say in Yiddish, a little zets, to
yeah.
get
It
it.
does.
Yeah,
It turned out the 3-point shooting contest, which we added in Dallas
yeah,
a couple years later, it was like that is something that's just based on pure. The players do pretty much enjoy doing
yeah.
that because
Oh yeah.
that's just whether the ball goes in or out. It's not how you look doing it. So.
Yeah, but
Um,
how bizarre that a center won it last year. I mean, Larry Bird is probably just sitting there just scratching his head, right?
Hey, bigs can shoot now. Bigs can
Yeah.
shoot.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's truly hard to believe, man.
Yeah.
Um, so Rick, I mean, your history, I know your history. I'm sure a lot of our followers do too, but not only creating All-Star Weekend, you were so instrumental with the Dream Team. You were right there in the ground helping to create the WNBA. I mean, you're up there in 2018 at the Hall of Fame, and you're being recognized, being enshrined. And you had a very passionate, wonderful speech. What was going through your mind? But what were you thinking that day?
Just how unlikely the journey was, for any of us, for you, for me, like who would have
Yeah,
ever guessed? I started going to Seattle SuperSonics basketball games with my dad in 1967 when the Sonics were an expansion franchise and,
yeah.
the Boston Celtics and Bill Russell would come to town, and
Hmm?
just to imagine, how lucky and how unlikely that journey was that would end up on the stage in Springfield. And for me, like as you know, you get to invite Hall of Famers to
Yeah.
be up there with you,
Hmm.
and that was one of the coolest things for me
Hmm.
because I got to have Bill Russell on the stage with me, David
Yeah.
Stern on
Yeah.
the stage with me, and
Yeah.
one of the great unsung heroes of the NBA, Russ Brannick,
Yeah.
on the stage with me, Annie Mars Drysdale, and Lenny Wilkins. So
Wow. That's a starting five
yeah,
right there, man.
that's a pretty good group. But
Yeah.
to be able to be there and share that with them, and
Hmm.
you really just think about what an amazing life we've had and what the game has given to you, and you just hope you've done something in return to deserve it.
Well, I've always known you to be humble, and you're being really humble now. But I mean, you seriously, with David, literally the architects of modern game and what it's become, and commercially and everything else. I just spent a week with Spencer Haywood, and his story is insane. I mean, what he did for the guys who came after him. And
Can,
not too many people in this game really get it or know it, So,
can you tell me? Can I tell you my story about how Spencer and I bonded?
yeah,
Um,
I would love to. Yeah.
so Spencer, as you remember, the NBA had an age limitation on players coming into the league, and the rival ABA did not. And so Spencer Haywood was a 19-year-old and signed with the ABA and became immediately like their best, their best superstar.
Yeah.
And our owner, Sam Schulman of the Sonics, kind of very Sam Schulman like, decided, I don't care what the NBA's rules are, I'm just going to go sign Spencer Haywood.
Mhm.
And as you know, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme
Yep.
Court ruled that just age was not a limitation the NBA could put on players unless it was collectively bargained with their
Hmm.
union. So the day that Spencer walked into, he actually, I think, he, private planes were unheard of then, but I think we had a game that night.
Hmm.
He flew in, but he was late. He didn't get there until just before the game started.
Hmm.
And I can't even tell you the feeling in the Seattle Center Coliseum when both teams were out on the court. He came walking out of the locker room into the court. The place went absolutely crazy. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Spencer was not always the easiest guy in those early years, especially.
Oh, yeah. And he admits that for sure. Yeah.
So it was team picture day.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know whether he did it because he really liked me or he did it just to kind of tweak the PR director or whatever. And Spencer said, I'm not getting in the team photo unless Rick's in the team photo.
Really?
I was in my little Sonic assistant trainer uniform, and so there it is. There I am, standing
Get
with the
out of
team.
here. Oh, that is the greatest story. I have to talk to him about that.
Yeah, Spencer insisted that I had to be in the picture. He wasn't getting it. He wasn't getting it. So
Unbelievable. Wow. I mean, yeah, let's talk about the Sonics. I mean, we collectively, they're going to be a team back in Seattle. It seems like it's destined to happen, right?
it's
I would think.
destined to happen.
Yeah.
And the next team will be the new Seattle SuperSonics.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
But the reality is, I don't know when. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
good for the owners, frankly, that
Mhm.
they have a business that's doing really well now.
Yeah.
The incremental revenue, historically, the way expansion has worked is whatever new owner paid for the team was divided equally amongst the existing owners.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that was a pretty good sounding deal for a lot of years for owners. But now, they're like, it also means you have one more partner
Hmm.
in all
Yeah.
the collective revenues. And,
Yeah.
I think where Seattle wins is it really will add something to the league, not
Yeah.
only to
Yeah.
recap the history of what happened there, but also, that's where Microsoft is. That's where Amazon is. It's one of the great connections to the Far East. And,
Sure.
it's really, I think, will be additive to the
Yeah.
NBA, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, they have the state of the art arena, that's for sure, up there.
Well, and
And
it's really like,
yeah.
I love that too, because that is the exact building that I was a 16-year-old ball boy in.
Right.
Because
Like
it, it was,
7 iterations ago. Yeah.
well,
Yeah. I remember it. Yeah.
yeah, it was built for the 1962 Seattle World Fair as the Washington State exhibit, but
Right.
designed to be turned into a sports arena
Yeah.
after the World's Fair was over. And
Uh,
Seattle is Seattle, so it's a little quirky and
Yeah.
in government, and they decided that the roof of that building was a historic landmark.
Yeah. Right.
So the challenge in really building a new arena was literally they had to suspend the roof,
Mhm.
demolish the building underneath, and build a new arena under it.
Crazy.
To today's standards, which
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim
But they did it.
Lewicki, Tim
Yeah.
Lewicki and the Oakview Group built an amazing arena. So the arena's ready. The hockey team is playing there, and we just
Yeah.
need an NBA team back in Seattle.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I had a great conversation with Gary Payton, who is, never lost for words with Gary. And he got really emotional when we talked about Seattle. He goes, my legacy's been erased. And I said, no, not really. I mean, it's just put on hold, but everybody remembers you. I took my daughter, was considering going to Cornish up in Seattle,
Oh yeah,
and we
definitely.
went up there, and downtown Seattle is like stores with Sonics jerseys all over the
Yeah,
place. People are
yeah.
wearing them. So the Sonics are very much alive, and they're just in hibernation for a little while.
Yeah,
But
I could go grab you all my Sonics gear
yeah,
that's
I bet.
in my closet over here. I wear it around all the time.
Yeah, I bet. Hey, can we go back to Bill Russell? So of all the guys, all the people, including Annie, not a guy, up there with you, who I love to death. Talk a little bit about Bill Russell, your relationship with him, how it went beyond, way beyond just, basketball. I mean,
Yeah,
first of all, how did that happen? Because Bill is not the easiest guy to approach or sort of get to know, right?
yeah. Well, 1973, I'd graduated from ball boy. I was working part time in the office
Mm.
as an assistant in the PR department. And much to everyone's amazement in Seattle, Sam Schulman convinced Bill Russell to become the coach and general manager of the Seattle SuperSonics. You can't even imagine what a big deal that was.
Yeah.
We had not had a lot of success up until that point. And the Bill Russell
Yeah.
was going to come to Seattle. And, the Bill Russell with 11 championship rings. And I was working weird hours because I had to work around my school schedule. And he's a very early riser. And I didn't have an office. I literally had a desk in a hallway that was at the opposite end of the office from where his office was. And
Right.
I'd
Right.
be in on a Saturday morning and I would hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and he'd like duck into his office, and that was that. And this would go on, and he probably ended up seeing me there 3 or 4 times. So one of these times he walked out of his office and just looked down the hallway. It was like, hey, he had no idea what my name. Hey, white boy down the hall. And I was so excited that he actually acknowledged my existence. I
Right.
was hurried to do anything he needed.
Yeah.
And that was how I met him really. And some reason, somehow, about a year later, he just decided to create a friendship. I don't know
Yeah.
why. To this day, it's the most unlikely of friendships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for just a few months short of 50 years, he was really my friend, and he
Mm.
acted like my friend and
Yeah.
cared about what I was doing. And I was able to, we did what friends did. We celebrated birthdays. We I helped him with some. He wanted to get back. He was really kind of estranged from the NBA. He hadn't really gotten involved with the NBA and was able to help reintroduce him back in. He wanted to get a license to make some products and help him do that. And he
Mhm.
got to know David Stern and got to know Adam, and he there's obviously a chapter where he helped me beyond belief, which
Mhm.
was when I made the decision in 2011 to come out as gay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was a huge moment in my life. And
Mhm.
had
Mhm.
met um, I'd met a reporter from the New York Times named Dan Barry, Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, who was going to do the story.
Yeah.
And Dan came out to Phoenix, where I was president of Sons at the time, and he said, Rick, with all due respect, like nobody knows who the hell you are. You're a guy in a suit in the office, right? So, but everybody knows the people that you've befriended on this journey, and if we could get them to tell your story, it would resonate with so many more people because they could
Mhm.
relate to the people that
Mhm.
were telling the story.
Yeah.
So the first one on my list was Bill,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
asked if I could come see him. Flew up to Seattle, drove over to his house in Mercer Island, never forget, like my heart pounding, walking up to his front door, the door swings open, and there's Bill in his Celtics hat.
It's the white guy from down the hall. Yeah.
Which is what he called me every time he saw me the first time, or every time he called, it would be, "Hey, white boy down the hall."
That's great.
But we went in his office, we sat in a couple chairs. There was a picture of Barack Obama between us that was autographed to Bill, "You're my hero." So
Wow.
nothing intimidating about the setting.
Yeah.
And I just said, "Bill, here's my story. And I'm going to ask you to do the one thing that you hate doing more than anything else in the world, and that's talking to a reporter."
Yeah, exactly. Or signing an autograph, right? One or the other.
Right. And that conversation probably took 2 minutes. And then we spent an hour laughing about stuff that had happened, that cackle of a laugh that
Yeah.
you always heard. And he made me so at ease.
Hmm.
And without him, I don't know when it would have ended up on the front page of the New York Times, but
Yeah.
he and David Stern and Steve Nash and some others were kind enough to agree to
Mhm.
do that. And for me, it was incredibly meaningful that he would participate.
Yeah. So Rick, looking back, this is 11 years ago, and then prior to that, and you were keeping this secret. I mean, what what was the fear at that point? I mean, you accomplished executive, you'd done so much. You know, everyone who knew you, loved you, and behind you. I mean, what was the fear of coming out earlier? Maybe it's
Yeah,
different. It is different time, I guess. I don't know.
it was and it wasn't. I mean, I still spend a lot of time talking to people who are in my situation in sports who are not ready to take that step.
Really?
Um,
Mm,
but there's the fear of unknown. There was nobody in my life who was in sports
mhm.
who had done an executive role, who had come out, and there was nobody I could look to and say, well, that worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah.
And that was a good part of the motivation for me. It's like I wish I
Hmm. Yeah.
could be that person for somebody else. That would be a really cool legacy
Yeah.
to leave. And it's there are a few more people certainly in the NBA now who've come out in office roles, not a president, but it
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it still is something that I am involved with, like every week. I talk to somebody who is trying to reach out for somebody who would understand exactly what they're debating. And you just didn't know how it would affect your career. You didn't know how it would affect what the thing that you love to do more than anything else. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that fear was really powerful for a long period of time.
Yeah.
It wasn't my time before when I did it. Like that was my
Gotcha.
time. And that's what I tell other people too. Like you'll know, like you'll know when the time is right. And
Right.
that was when the time was right for me.
Yeah, it had to be very cathartic, I would think, at that. I mean,
Mhm.
can't put myself in your spot, but even just thinking about just finally just being able to live life,
Yeah,
not have this whatever stigma, which is
yeah,
no sense to begin with. But
yeah.
um, I want to go back to our friend, mentor, um, Uncle David, and Terry Lyons told me a great story. He knew that I was talking to you today, and I saw him at Hall of Fame a couple of weeks ago, and he told me about the "I love this game" story, how that happened. All right, I don't want to jump into it.
I
You
want to hear
should know
you
that.
say it. I still talk to Paul
So
Gilbert almost every day too.
yeah,
So
so Terry said, I got to get this right. He said that you guys were in a conference room 15B on the 15th. Terry remembers these things.
it was the
And-
only conference room we had.
right, right, right. There was no A, it was just B.
Right.
And these guys from the ad agency came in and they kept pitching ideas. I forgot the name of the agency, and everybody hated it and they thought it was stupid and they didn't get it. And one of the guys said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't figure out why all you guys love this game so much. Is really how it was born?
I think that's pretty close. I think that's pretty close. I think it was Andy Berlin. I think it was Andy Berlin. But I think, yeah. And all of a sudden, you
Right.
know,
Light bulbs
everybody,
go off.
yeah, everybody's like, that's it. That's
But
it.
but the
So
early commercials, I just YouTubed them today. The one of the opera singer, ridiculous, right?
yeah, yeah.
Insane. I mean, you guys were just having fun doing this, and that's
But
the thing
we,
about David, right? That he, he thought out of the box. That was like what
yeah.
his claim to fame.
No, I think that's what, if you could spend enough time around him, anytime you went into he was a voracious reader, right? He read everything. And
Yeah.
most of the time in those days, it wasn't online, it was in periodicals, newspapers, magazines, whatever.
Yeah.
And he always had a stack this tall on his desk of
Mhm.
just stuff that he had. And whenever you would go in for a meeting, like he'd be digging through this stack and hand you a couple things when you left. And
Right.
you go back to your office and you're reading this, and it's like, what in the world does this have to do with the NBA? And then there'd be something in there where you would go, oh,
Yeah. Some
okay,
nugget. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
But he was a lawyer, but he ended up the best broadcast executive. He ended up the best marketing executive.
Hmm.
He taught himself by just having this unquenchable desire to learn something new and approach. I described his approach every day is like he woke up every day thinking, everything I've learned up until now might be wrong. And I'm going to leave myself open today
Uh-huh.
to accept a new idea that
Uh-huh.
maybe how we're doing it isn't the right way.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to challenge myself to think about why somebody's doing it that way when we're doing it this way, and work myself back to our situation and either decide I think we're doing it right, or you know what, there's an idea here that we ought to be trying. And
Hmm.
the early years, especially, that we had nothing to lose, right? Because it's not like we were the NFL or Major League Baseball, right? It
Right.
was like even making mistakes was like cheered by the
Oh,
media.
you got to give me one thing that didn't work, or threw against the wall, it just didn't stick, or David
Well,
thought you guys are out of your mind, don't even tell me, something.
there was the time we were arrogant enough to think we could start a competitive football
A
league.
football league?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We don't have a run league. Why don't we just start a new football league? And it
Uh,
actually was kind of fun. We ended up talking to Ebersol for a while. I think Vince McMahon got involved for a little while, and I
uh,
think we finally
yeah.
came to our senses and agreed. That NFL thing is pretty good. We maybe don't want to poke that bear, but
Yeah, right.
you
Oh,
that's an example of something that we kind of lost our minds on for a few days and then changed it
yeah.
around. So,
Well, what you just spoke about really his mentorship of you, and is that, did you take that with you as you progressed, and then all of a sudden you're leading teams and you're leading organizations, and you had this great mentor and other mentors, right?
yeah.
So I read a great quote about your definition of success, right? Is all about individuals, melding together and being open to ideas. And everyone I know, and my experience with you too has always been that you'll listen, and it might be another idea that you didn't even think about. Some people in your position are a little too arrogant to say, "Oh, I didn't think of that. That was a great idea. That's why I hired you, by the way."
Yeah,
Right?
right. But I do think if you're lucky enough to have great bosses and mentors, and David was mine for 17 years,
Yeah.
you do like we could, as we could not be more different personality wise.
Hmm.
There are no two different people, more different people. But I
Yeah.
think you're able to see the things that you really admire about how somebody leads that you can make your own, not by copying what they do, but expressing it authentically in your own way. But
Hmm.
you want to take away some things. And with him, it really, I think that kind of desire to just be a lifetime learner and always be open
Hmm.
to different ways of doing things you've done or new ideas that might be
Yeah.
happening. I think that was definitely one of the things. And his true nature was so pure and compassionate, despite the reputation of being
Mhm.
this terror
Yeah.
as a boss. Was one of the softest, nicest human beings on the face of the earth, and
Yeah.
that balance is what made him so special. That he could absolutely kill you during the day, and you'd
Yeah.
go home at night thinking like, oh, this is just not going to work. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you remember in those days we had home telephones.
And
At 10
beepers,
o'clock at
right?
night, 10
Yeah.
o'clock at night, the phone would ring, and it wasn't David Stern. It was like Uncle Dave. Like it was, maybe he knew he kind of overstepped that day, but
Yeah.
you know, by the end of the conversation, you were charged up and ready to go run through a wall for him and for the NBA the next day. It was quite a skill.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Well, Rick, tell me what's going on now? Are you still with the Warriors in some capacity?
No,
Not at all, huh?
well, my capacity with the Warriors is their biggest fan.
So will I
Really,
see you on ring night is the big question. Will you
no,
be
I
there?
actually I'm not going to be in town on Ring Night,
Oh, okay.
but it will be. It's must see TV for me. I'll go to a bunch of games.
Yeah.
Still love everybody there and love
Hmm.
what was created there and have a lot. It's such a big part of my life. It always will be. But no,
Yeah.
I've got some. I joined a couple of public company boards.
Mhm.
I, I was lucky enough to run into a 40 something billionaire venture capital guy who's about to buy 15% of a really good team.
Mhm.
Can't tell you who. I
Yeah.
think I may end up as an executive producer of a docudrama series.
So all this retirement stuff, like I
Oh
said to
my
David,
God.
I went to David's office and interviewed him. He was supposedly retired. He's on 13 boards. I'm like, you're working harder now than when you were like sitting at the desk.
My bucket list thing you've already touched on is if I could be useful in any way in getting an NBA team back to Seattle, that for me would bookend a career that, I don't want to run it. I just want to be helpful
Yeah,
for them to get one back there because I
that
think
would be amazing.
the next opening night for the Seattle SuperSonics would be a pretty great way to put an exclamation point in the career.
That would be what Phil Jackson would call a full circle event,
It's a full
right?
circle event.
Well,
Well
I have
said.
to tell you, my friend, publicly that you were literally the first person that I went to about the concept of Legends of Sport. That was 9 years ago. I think you were with the
Well,
Suns at that point,
yeah.
right?
Well, I would have been right at the beginning. If it was 9 years ago, would have been right at the beginning of my Warriors
No,
tenure
you
there.
were still at the Suns. So
Okay, so
it's got
it's
to be
more than
like
9 years. So it's
11 years.
11
I don't
years ago.
even, who
Right,
knows?
11 years
But,
ago.
to your credit, I mean, you're a busy guy. You gave me some ideas. We have sort of tried to implement them, waiting for a gigantic bucket of money to fall out of the sky. But, meanwhile, this is the sixth season of the podcast. You're like number
Congratulations.
175. So,
Congratulations. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know, you're Andrew Bernstein. So the reason the Hall of Fame honored you, there's a reason for that.
Well, thank you.
So many people in the world have seen the NBA through your lens. You
Thank you.
know,
Thank you.
it's
Yeah.
we all have that one photo that you took that was a big part of our lives.
I appreciate,
You deserve
David said back in the day to Nat Butler and I together, he said, you guys are in charge of the visual history of the league.
no pressure.
And then Adam, fast forward, you know, 35 years, I think, the night of the enshrinement, remember the NBA, Adam gave us a really nice little cocktail party,
Yeah.
you and me, and I think it was Russ or Rod, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. And Adam takes me aside. I'm like 35 years in already. He says, Andy, I think your best pictures are in front of you. I'm like, okay, that's like the gauntlet. Thanks so much.
You learn from the master. You can tell.
Right, right. I didn't need any more motivation, but that was it.
That's great. That's
But
great.
anyway, at some point I'll have to find out how this whole retirement thing works. But I,
Don't
I
do it.
yeah, I've stopped counting my NBA years in numbers. So I count only in jerseys now. So I'm in my James Worthy year,
Okay. All
hoping to get
right.
to AC Green.
That's good. I like
Don't
that.
think I'm going to get to Ralph Sampson, 50, but I keep going, man.
I like
But
that. I
but
like
Rick, I got to tell you, man, you're just a great friend, and all the times we spent together, there was a lot of pressure in those days. You know it, I know it. We got through it somehow, survived it,
Yeah.
and
No,
I couldn't be happier for you where you are in your life right now. And anytime I get to speak to you, especially at this long period of time, is just a bonus. So thank you.
well, right back at you, Andy. It's been one of the real joys of my life to be able to have you in it and to see how you've blossomed as an artist and a businessman and what you've contributed to this sport.
Well, thank
Won't
you.
be anybody else like that.
Thank you, my friend. And say hi to Todd for me. Hope maybe I'll see you guys down here. You still going to LAFC games?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're good this year. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah, they are good. We've been going to the women's games, the
Oh,
Angel
nice.
City
I
game.
haven't
We got
been
season
there.
tickets. Yeah, it's fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I won't see you at ring night. I'll wave to you on TV. But
Okay.
I'll
I'll
get
be
a good
looking
picture
for
of
it.
Peter. Peter has become one of my mentors, by the way. I have his thing on the wall right here. Dreams plus goals equals destiny is like stenciled on my wall. And
Wow. You
that's a
can't
whole
do
other
any better.
conversation.
You can't do any better than that.
No, I mean he's just incredible. But
Yeah.
anyway, leave it at that.
Okay.
Thanks so much, my man.
Great to be with you.
And I
Good
will
luck.
see you. It's Sonic's opening night. Let's make
Okay.
a date of it.
Promise. You will be there.
All right, buddy. See you.
Nice.
Big thanks to my friend, my colleague, Rick Welts, for taking the time from his busy retirement schedule to come speak to us at Legends of Sport. This guy can't slow down. I know he has a little bit, and I'm sure he has less stress in his life, but he's such a great example for all of us and has been really an amazing person to get to know over 4 decades. I mean, it's amazing that we go back that far. We shared the stage, sort of. He was on the stage. I was like off to the right. But in 2018, when both of us were honored by the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, that was a really special moment for me, especially to have been honored and that in that same ceremony as Rick. So, Rick, I wish you the best as life's journey continues, and we'll catch up with you again soon. Thanks for taking the time today. Remember, you can find us on the iHeart app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. Keep following us on Instagram, folks, at Legends of Sport. Our Twitter, at Legends_of_Sport. Our website is legendsofsport.net. And our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. My photography can be found at ADB Photo Inc. on Instagram. So, folks, season 6 is well underway. So thrilled to be bringing this new season of the Legends of Sport podcast to all of you. Please keep reviewing and rating us and tell all your friends. So until next time, folks, we'll have another guest for you. Stay safe, stay well.